All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela McShane, and it is my privilege to welcome you to the T2U Innovation Series. This series features firsthand experience and best practices from distinguished instructors at colleges and universities around the country. These educators have valuable perspectives about the benefits of bringing NASA-developed technology into the classroom. Today, we'll hear from Ken Walsleben, Professor of Entrepreneurial Practice at Syracuse University's Whitman School of Management. A quick note, audience member microphones are going to be muted throughout the duration of this webinar, so please type your questions in the chat box, and we will get to those at the end in the Q&A section. So I'm going to talk a little bit about T2U, the program, introduce our speaker, and then hand it over to let him tell you a little bit about the program. So NASA's Technology Transfer University initiative helps NASA build relationships with these innovative colleges and universities while bringing that cutting-edge NASA-developed technology to student entrepreneurs and other types of students who want to work with it in various settings. So I invite you to visit the T2U website and check out the program for yourself. We've got a contact email if you've got questions for us after this or interested in bringing this to your classroom. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker. Ken Walsleben is a professor of entrepreneurial practice at Syracuse University's Whitman School of Management. He is a member of Whitman's noted entrepreneurship and emerging enterprises faculty. After 30 years working in the financial industry, including the creation and 20-year management of a successful financial services firm, Ken joined the Whitman faculty full-time in 2014. Since then, he has been chosen by Whitman's graduating seniors as the Professor of the Year in 2017 and 2019, and most recently 2024. Congratulations. Ken has also received Syracuse University's prestigious Meredith Award for teaching excellence. He has been chosen by numerous Whitman and university student scholars as the most influential faculty member and has accompanied them to award banquets at both the school and university level. Ken remains one of Whitman's most popular professors and has done so primarily while teaching the school's demanding Capstone course for graduating seniors. He has also created and continues to teach Whitman's popular Entrepreneurial Turnarounds course, both graduate and undergraduates, and created and continues to teach the online version of the Foundations of Entrepreneurship for graduate students. Ken is also a 1983 graduate of Syracuse University. And with that, I'll hand it over to him to tell you a little bit about his program.
Well, thank you very much for that gracious interview, Michaela. You've been doing some homework, far more than what I had told you about. So thank you for that. Good afternoon to everyone. I want to kind of start out today's conversation by explaining that I too was in the audience for one of these webinars about 2 years ago when I first learned about the T2U program. And I must tell you, it was a well-spent hour because on the other side of that, I was able to initiate a program in cooperation with NASA that has substantially transformed our Capstone program here at Syracuse University's Whitman School of Management. What I'd like to do during our conversation is to introduce to you what we do at Syracuse with regard to our Capstone program for undergraduate seniors. Throughout that, I will explain a little bit about how we incorporate some of the NASA program, the T2U program, technology for universities, technology transfer to universities. Then I'll also show you a bit about how to interact with the T2U website and looking at the portfolio of opportunities, portfolio of patents. So let me first kind of explain a little bit from my perspective about how T2U works with us at the university level. As many of you are aware, NASA scientists create lots of different technologies. They put together tremendous advancements that they want to see used in the commercial sector and the private sector. NASA has secured these technologies with patents. They have a portfolio of approximately 1,200 patents, if memory serves me right. And they make that portfolio of patents available to those of us in the private sector to be able to utilize, to be able to work with. From a university standpoint, although we're not literally licensing technologies, we're using them for educational purposes to advance student awareness and innovation. So it really kind of works well hand in hand with the universities around the country. When we first started working with NASA and the T2U program, we were probably number 44, as I recall, 44 universities around the country using the program. I believe that number is now in excess of 60. I'll defer to Michaela for further guidance on that. But the point is that through this program, we've been able to utilize innovation, be able to utilize it and incorporate it within our courses to the benefit of our students. So what I'd like to do is spend a few moments with you to kind of explain to you what we do from our capstone standpoint at Whitman. Understanding that all of you who are educators on this call will have different versions of capstone courses for your particular graduating students. Nonetheless, I want to try and take a few moments to kind of explain to you what we do. Not from the standpoint of trying to suggest that we have it all figured out, but rather to kind of just let you see how we've incorporated technology throughout the program. So the first thing to do is to kind of explain a little bit about our undergraduate capstone course. We require all of our graduating seniors to take this course as a condition of graduation. That is not unique. Most of those of us that are educators on the call have similar programs. Ours is a rather different approach, though, for the student practitioner. Most of what we talk about is inquiry-based learning. We direct the students towards information, but ultimately we require our students to go find answers to their concerns. This is a rather different approach academically from many of the different classes that students have to take prior to this point. So it is a bit of an adjustment. We try and challenge our students in ways that they've never been challenged before. Inquiry-based learning is just one element of it. But ultimately, we're trying to bridge the gap, as I like to say, to bridge the gap between the coddled college days that will soon be leaving and the real world that awaits. No, it's not going to be as demanding as a real world job, but it's somewhere in between the two, and it sort of toughens up the students, gets them ready for what's coming at them. Our students, because of that reality, know that this is a course not to be trifled with. They know that they have to take it as a senior. They know that they have to buckle up, that there's a lot of work to be done. Because of that, most of our students come into the course with their proverbial tail between their legs. They're not happy to be there at the beginning. They know that from their friends they've heard there's a lot of work involved. Still, from their friends, I've also heard that they can be a rather rewarding and enriching experience if they do it right. So they come in with some measure of trepidation. And when I say when they come in, literally all of the students at our business school, the Whitman School of Management, whether they're students in accounting, management, finance, marketing, entrepreneurship, supply chain management, everyone has to take this class. We try and purposefully move students out of their individual academic silos into working as a team in a business environment. So what we're looking to do is challenge the students by the end of this semester to build a fully functional real-world business plan. This is not a course where they're putting together a pitch. This is a full business plan. And it starts with us as faculty dividing the students into teams of 4 or 5. And we divide the students into teams based on their student academic background. So, by example, each team will have an accounting major, a finance major, marketing major, etc. So we want to have student diversification of academic background. We'll mix and match men and women, and we will basically have, across the course of a year, approximately 100 student teams, numbering in each team of 4 to 5 students. So we've purposely learned some hard lessons, which is don't let the students self-choose. Don't let them just pick their friends. We purposely put the teams together so that we get an assortment of students that don't necessarily know one another, have not necessarily worked together before, because these are soft skills that the students will develop along the way to learn how to work with people that are different from them, that have different experiences, different backgrounds. And that diversification we find really rewards them on a postgraduate basis, because in the real world, when they work in corporate America, they don't get to choose their team members then either. So we purposely put them together in this fashion. As I mentioned, we make them put together a fully functional real-world business plan by the end of the semester. But the question is, what's the starting point? We do not, here at Whitman, we do not position them with a particular business idea. We don't provide them any guidance whatsoever. We don't say, we want you to put an idea together in the world of transportation or law enforcement or anything like that. We basically say to the students, hey guys, this world is wide open. You're going to pick and choose anything that you see out there, but it has to be commercially viable. So we're going to come back to this issue of ideation, as we call it, because this is really where NASA has helped plug a big hole for us. We found that while it's challenging for students to put together a fully functioning business plan by the end of the semester, the bigger challenge is coming up with a worthy idea for students to have to look out at the world and see where there's a problem that they can solve and do so in a commercially viable manner. That's not easy. So in doing so, we're pushing them to come up with their own ability to see problems and to innovate solutions. Thereafter, once we've agreed with the student team that this will indeed be your pursuit, they then have to put on their research hats and they have to get busy because they've got to figure out how to put together a proper business plan. They've got to research a lot. And as you can appreciate as you're seeing this slide develop, this is not an easy lift for our students. As undergraduates, this is a big deal. During the course of the semester, they're learning how to work together and work together in a cooperative fashion. And they know that we're building up to a crescendo. You see, at the end of the semester, we're going to require that each of the student teams enter into a business plan competition. Um, that is to say that we put all of our student teams together with outside judges to put together their presentations, to be able to pitch to teams of judges who are posing themselves as angel investors. We want the students to be able to see what it's like to be able to explain what they're looking to do, to be able to compete for limited dollars and what they're looking to do. And while this is still fictional, we try and make it as real world as we possibly can. Now, what goes into a typical business plan? Well, as you see on the slide, it's going to be 40 to 50 pages. This is a manifesto, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't an executive summary. Well, executive summary is part of it. As you can see here, we require that the students do real industry analysis, real research, real market analysis, talk to real people, real practitioners in their market, potentially talk to their competition, find out what the next best alternative might be. They have to think through their economic model. What are their revenues, their revenue drivers, their volumes, their margins, their operating leverage? They then have to try and figure out how they're going to market this, knowing full well that they need to do so with very limited dollars. So they have to understand how bootstrapping works, and they have to find out innovative ways to be able to build buzz about their product. They have to do real world research and development, ideally being able to put together a model of their product, some kind of a product or development of a product that they can show on their business plan competition. But there's more to the business plan. This is just page one. We also have them think about operations. Are they going to outsource development of their product? Are they going to outsource manufacturing? Might they do it in-house? If they're going to outsource, who will their partners be? While all of them will be managers of their business, and the 5 members will be each wear a different C-level hat, they also need to be thinking about their structure of their company. Are they a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC? How are they structured? How are they capitalized? How much treasury stock might there be left? Will they have plans for outside engagement with boards of directors, boards of advisors? Who might their professional advisors be? They also need to be thinking about, in number 9 here, about the schedule, the rollout schedule. What will their first 6 months be like compared to their second 6 months? How soon before they can get into the market? Like all good entrepreneurs, they need to think about risks. They need to identify risks. And perhaps most importantly, they need to think about how to mitigate those risks. When I say mitigate, how do they reduce the probability or the magnitude of that risk? All entrepreneurs face risk. Everyone who reads a business plan knows that they are reading a document that by its very existence is risky. It's important for our students to be able to identify those risks and tell the reader how they've worked around them. The students have to put together, and perhaps one of the bigger challenges throughout the course of the semester is they have to put together 5 years of pro forma financial projections. That is to say, it includes a balance sheet, an income statement, cash flow report, a valuation table. They need to try and work this out on a monthly basis for the first couple of years. They really need to be able to prove that not only can they launch their business, but that they can stay in business and that their plans are not incredible, but rather credible. that the students are able to be able to convey to us, the reader, that what they're looking to do is achievable. And then finally, based on those financials, they can put together a valuation of their company and propose an offering. All of that's going to be done with regard to the end of their business plan process. And as they enter into their presentation, their business plan competition, all of this has got to be done and figured out. So as you can see, there's a pretty significant lift here. But I must tell you that the very first part of this, coming up with the idea, has always historically been a big challenge for us. As you can imagine, when you ask students to come up with business ideas, their first thought is to think of life through their own personal lens, that being a business student, probably living off campus. So we get all sorts of ideas I like to have a refrigerator that tells me when my food is spoiled. I think that kind of tells us a little bit about how refrigerators and off-campus dorms, off-campus housing works. Or maybe an app to tell us how to do recipes or how to get a self-cleaning kitchen going. You get the idea. These are student-centric kinds of ideas that we routinely turn away. Instead, what we're looking for are ideas that can truly make a statement in the world. All of this builds up, of course, as I mentioned, to a business plan competition. We call that Capstone Friday here at Syracuse, because it is the last Friday of the semester, and all the students know that this is the point of departure. This is where they have to stand up and show the world what they've been doing the previous 3 months. And on Capstone Friday, we have a series of competition levels. The first plan, as you can appreciate, when you have so many different student teams, there's no way to do one after another after another. You can't do that with 50 or 60 or even 100 teams. So what we do is we divide them into initial competition rooms. We call that the first round. Each room will have 4 or 5 student teams, and each room will have 3 judges. The judges will be a mix of faculty as well as outside professionals from the business community. Our students will then, with great trepidation and excitement and a fair degree of nervousness, step up and present their business plan. They'll have slides. They'll likely have an example of their product. They'll describe how their research, what their research has resulted in. And the students have a 15-minute period of time to convey all of this information. That sounds like a lot of time, but in reality, over the course of 3 months, there's a lot more than 15 minutes worth of effort that's gone into this. So they have to really condense their efforts into a 15-minute presentation. Thereafter, they have to suffer through 10 minutes of Q&A from the judges. Each team has to deal with questions and then try and anticipate questions so that they can best answer them. At the end of that 15-minute presentation and 10 minutes worth of Q&A, that team has now completed their first round effort. Within each room, as I mentioned, we'll have 5 teams competing. The students will watch one another compete. They'll be there for one another's competition. At the end, they will all leave, leaving the judges behind in their competition room. And the judges will rank order the teams as they've been presented. That's just the beginning of Capstone Friday. That will take a few hours, and the students are beyond excited. There's a mixture of relief, excitement, realization that they think they did pretty well. And ironically, as all the students leave their rooms, they all think they won. And that's great because they all have done a great job. But nonetheless, that's just round one. You see, amongst those many competition rooms, we will come up with a singular winner from each of those rooms. We might have 10 or 15 rooms, each of which have a room winner. We have to somehow boil that down to 5 finalists that will compete later on that day. How does that happen? Our first cut is to have each of the room winners present an elevator pitch. They get 90 seconds to present their pitch to the entire student body. So we'll have not just a singular competition room where we only have 4 or 5 teams. Now we have a student body with all of the student teams in one auditorium. And we find out then and there that Team X has just won the first room. And a representative from that team must immediately come forward and provide a 90-second elevator pitch on their idea. From the quality of the underlying business plans, as well as the elevator pitches, we then have completed all we need to complete in order to pick out our top 5 teams. Those top 5 teams will then present to yet again to a different group of judges. And those judges are going to be pretty challenging. The students still have in the second round, the final round, they still have 15 minutes to present, but now they have 15 minutes of judges questioning and answering to suffer through. Um, and those judges can hit them with some pretty withering questions. And I must say, our cooperation with NASA has resulted in a great excitement when our friend Michaela, who introduced me a few minutes ago, was able to come and join us on Capstone Friday this past semester. And she was indeed one of our finals round judges. And you see our hero Michaela there, third from the left, looking down on her notes, recording notes. Michaela was there. NASA has seen fit to be able to send her along and help us out. And we were thrilled to have her there for the day and give her a chance to kind of see how our student teams interact. So with Michaela's help, we were able to pick the top 3 teams out of the finals round. And you can see here that the students are pretty jacked up at the end. They're pretty excited. They've worked their way through 3 hard months of work to create something out of nothing. They get awards, they get plaques, they get acclaim, they get a little bit of money to spread around, but the real prize is the bragging rights. They were able to say amongst all their friends, we were the number 1, 2, or 3. And I must admit that at the end of it, there's a fair amount of relief as well. All right, and you can see that in some of these faces. This was actually the winning team this past semester with their professor, and you can see more relief than excitement, I think. But it was indeed a wonderful time and a great success. Now, as I've explained to you previously, the issue of ideation has been our biggest challenge. Getting students to get off campus, to be able to see the world for all it is, to look at the world in different ways, be able to see opportunity where they previously had never looked before has turned into be quite a challenge for them and for us as faculty. The engagement of NASA has dramatically shortened that curve. It's made it a lot better. Now, we don't require that our students use NASA. We don't require that they are using only NASA solutions and innovation, but we make them aware of it. And indeed, Michaela has seen fit to join our classes via Zoom each semester to introduce the NASA program, to introduce how the T2U program works, to show the students, as I will show you in a few moments, how to look through the portfolio of patents. And in doing so, the students are able to shorten that curve, as I mentioned. So T2U has come to the rescue. And I would say, sticking my thumb in the air, that approximately half, a little more than half of our student teams will ultimately identify and commercialize a NASA-sponsored innovation. So it has been a dramatic change for us and a dramatic improvement for our program. So let me give you some examples. You might be wondering, okay, how well has this worked? Well, as you'll see here, NASA, they have a patent for electronic embroidery. What's electronic embroidery? It's literally fabric that is woven with wires that can convey electricity. We had a student team use that for neuromuscular exercise and stimulation through rehab. They also saw fit to create a lining of this fabric underneath between the skin and a cast for when someone gets a broken bone. And you, if any of us have ever had a broken bone with a cast, you know that you have muscular atrophy thereafter. But if you had the ability to stimulate that muscle with electrical impulse during the course of its healing process, you wouldn't have nearly as much atrophy. They saw fit to find a way to do just that. We had another student team that used another type of NASA patent. This was for fire-resistant fabric. NASA has figured out a way to create a fabric that is itself fire-resistant to really high temperatures. Our student team said, hey, you know, there's a lot of wildfire-prone regions in the western US. We think we can create a temporary DIY roof fabric that can cover roofs using typical hook and loop fasteners around the edges where someone beginning of the season, or if there's a wildfire that threatens, can put this on their roof and reduce the threat of fire and hot embers hitting their roof and starting fire. We've got other student teams that saw that NASA had a patent for measuring battery life remotely. Simply waving an instrument towards a battery-powered item, you can tell the battery life. You don't need to literally attach to the battery to do so. Our student team said, hey, you know, there's a lot of smoke detectors out there that are non-functioning. They created a product that would both measure the efficacy of the smoke detection as well as the battery inspection. And we're able to do so from a distance of approximately 10 feet. So that as a property owner, as a landlord, as a building inspector, you don't need to get up and physically inspect each individual smoke detector and press a button, but rather you could wave this unit at it and determine if it's functional or not. We had another student team who noticed the NASA patent for sensing hydration in organisms. They figured out that they could put together a handheld hydration for homebound elderly who themselves can simply measure their breath and can determine if they're properly hydrated. Now, hydration for many of us is not necessarily a worry. However, for seniors, uh, lack of hydration it can be truly a life-threatening situation. We had another student team who noticed a patent for the fact that NASA has figured out how to measure heart function remotely, presumably for astronauts. So we had two different teams use that technology. One used it as part of their suite of product features for crib-mounted baby monitor. Yet another one used it as well for homebound seniors, being able to set it up in a room where a homebound senior can simply sit in a chair and their heart function could be remotely monitored by loved ones and/or medical facilities. Yet another example, removal of PCB pollutants is a NASA patent, and we've had student teams that have pursued it both for soil remediation as well as for treatment of old paint in old buildings. Um, so you get the idea. Oh yeah, one last one, which is self-healing film that NASA has created, presumably for space junk and different items that might fly through space that might poke a hole in film. Here on Earth, something as mundane as using it as rust and corrosion protection for automotive vehicles on the underside of automotives could be kind of effective. So you can kind of see there's a lot of innovation that spawns creativity in the student mind. What I'd like to do now is take a moment to kind of show you how to use the NASA portfolio and the portal itself to be able to show you what indeed our students do and how easy it is to work with NASA. Okay, so the landing page for NASA's T2U program, Technology Transfer to Universities, is technology.nasa.gov/T2U. And that landing page describes a bit about the program. It just gives you kind of an entry portal into the rest of the information and shows different universities around the country that have sponsored different programs and affiliations with T2U. If you wanted to get into their portfolio of patents, you'll see at the top here that they've got examples of virtual events like this one, spin-off companies. They have software that they've created and how that might be utilized. And remember the patent portfolio of roughly 1,200 patents? If we click here, we'll see that they've listed them, but they've gone further and made life a whole lot easier for us. They've cataloged and categorized all of these patents. So you can see all these different categories, communications, electrical, environment, you get the idea. Students can do a deep dive through any one of these different categories to find areas of interest that they might have. As many of you know who are educators, the environment is of great interest to present day students. Let's take a look at environment by example. You can click on environment and you can see that there's a portfolio of different examples of different technologies that they've created there at NASA. Indeed, do you remember I mentioned something about soil remediation? Well, you can click on that right here, for example, and NASA has done a lot of our work for us. They've created what they call technology opportunity pages, or TOPS pages. And here you see an example of soil remediation with plant or fungal combination. So NASA has figured out that there are plant and fungal combinations that can remove pollutants from soil. And that led one of our student teams to say, hey, we can create a product that sells this to pollution remediation companies around the country. This TOPS page describes the technology, does so in easy to read English. But if you really want to get into the weeds as a student, you can also inspect the patent by clicking on the patent. You can then go to the patent in more detail, and you can see, for example, what the patent was, when it was filed, what it was for. It'll provide an abstract of it, and all of the requisite detail behind that patent can be found here just by clicking through links. So you can imagine as you watch this now how dramatically different ideation can be for your students. When we have to sit down previously and say to our students, just imagine the world and go anywhere and think of stuff, inevitably, students kind of looked at each other and said, I'm stuck. Now, with NASA's patent portfolio, we can tell them, you need help? You got ideas? You want more ideas? You want to be stimulated? Take a dive through here and let's see what might speak to each of you. So as we've gone through this, you've had a chance now to kind of see a little bit about what Syracuse University does. You've seen a bit about how we run our Capstone program. You've seen how effective working with T2U has been for us and how it solved a real pain point for us in our presentation. But also, we've seen how supportive T2U can be for our program. We couldn't ask for more than what NASA has been doing with us. And you can also see how easy it is to navigate the NASA site for T2U and to be able to look at all these different tabs pages. So I'd like to now turn it over to Michaela and to you folks for any questions that you might have that I might be able to answer for you.
Thanks, Ken. All right, we've received a couple of questions in the chat box, so go ahead and continue to drop those in as you think of them, and we'll get to the ones that have already been put in here. All right, so to start off, given your background in the financial industry, how do you view the intersection of entrepreneurship and emerging technology and maybe academia as well?
They clearly all do merge, no question about it. When you've got academia and technology coming together, virtually anything can happen. The ability to come up with creative ideas is limited only by one's imagination. Being able to see the world through imaginative eyes tends to be the starting point for all things entrepreneurial. How, as your question posed, how does the intersection of finance work in with all that? Well, we all can have great ideas. That doesn't necessarily mean they all can be financed or that they're all financially viable. That's where the business planning comes into play. And that's where we try as best we can through our Capstone program to ensure that the ideas that people come up with are commercially viable and can be ultimately financed and can be sold at a profit. That value proposition lies at the core of a lot of entrepreneurship. But the idea is that entrepreneurship ultimately is taking an opportunity spawned by innovation typically and figuring out a way to deliver and add value where none existed before.
Awesome, thank you. In terms of technology selection, what criteria do you consider when looking at or when advising your students on technology alignment for their classes? And do they ever have questions, need to consult with you further?
They do. Some of the advice we give them, we don't want to limit their exploration in any way, shape, or form. At the same time, there has to be some reasonable limits, which is that their idea must be achievable, that it has to be kind of grounded in a product or a service, and has to be able to add value to a receptive marketplace. So their ideas need to be able to have a market where it can be used by someone. So clearly that's a starting point in terms of what kind of advice we give them. Now, I should also further explain that as they come through with their ideas, that there are some that we turn away. There are some that we turn away because they're not novel enough, they're not unique enough. As well, they also might not be focused enough. There's a fine line. There's kind of a Goldilocks zone that we need to try and find our way into. And students, in part through their research, have to try and figure out, they might have an initial starting point of an idea, but it has to take some iteration. It has to be refined. It has to be thought through, and oftentimes needs to be thought through by bumping into its marketplace, by talking to people that are in the market. You heard me mention as well before that research plays a large part in our presentation, and indeed it does. In order for students to do that, it has to be financially viable, it has to be achievable, And once we feel that we've hit those two thresholds, then we're in a position where we can then tell the students, let's go forward and build a business plan together.
Thanks. We got a follow up to that. What happens if the idea isn't financially viable? Does the group need to start over?
Yes, frankly. We don't let the students get too far down the road. We don't want them to waste their time. But if there's no way to produce the product in a commercially viable fashion, whether it be financially viable as measured by profit or not, we do turn the students back around. We try and determine that rather quickly. I should add, for those of us that are academics in the entrepreneurial space, you heard about something called a business model canvas. As an interim step between ideation and starting the business plan, we ask the students to complete a business model canvas, which sort of fleshes out a lot of these basics. It's going to flesh out whether or not the planned idea is viable, whether it can be done at a profit. And we don't anticipate at this early stage that the students aren't necessarily going to have all of the answers to how the technology will work. But we're going to know fairly quickly if it's going to be ultimately viable. Um, we don't expect to have all the answers prior to launching, but we are going to try and conclude pretty quickly and early on so as not to waste our time, the whole issue of financial viability.
Great, thank you. Do any of these students go on to actually start these businesses?
Mm, rarely, but yes. And I wish the answer were different. As our Capstone program rolls out, you've heard me explain that all of our students have to take this course. Now, that includes students that in many cases already have their postgraduate employment lined up. They've gone to school to become a finance major, a marketing major, accounting major, whatever it might be. They've got their postgraduate employment lined up, and for them to then call home in the middle of their senior year to mom and dad and say, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm going to go pursue. I'm going to forget all that. I'm going to go pursue this new business idea I have." That conversation tends not to happen too often. Um, we do, ironically, have every semester, we have business ideas that are developed that I think are real world worthy, that have real legitimate business capabilities. Um, but unfortunately, we don't have enough students pursue them. It's not a question of money per se. It's a question of career design and career ambition. Um, Not too many are looking to go start a business right out of school. Most of them want to get some seasoning. I will say that I've had a number of students. I've been a professor now full time for 10 years, and it's now starting to turn a bit, where now 10 years out, I've got students who are now coming back to me and saying, "Hey, professor, remember me from 8 years ago? I did this idea and the business plan on such and such, and do you think that's really worthy? Because I'd really like to try and throw my hat into the entrepreneurial ring, and that I'm wondering if maybe I should try and pursue that idea." So I am now starting to have those kind of conversations.
Hmm.
But those companies that have been started right out of college, I can probably count on one hand. It hasn't been often enough, frankly.
Thanks. Um, how do you see the development of this program over time? And how have you changed it since you began?
Mhm. Um, we've changed it in a few different ways. We've clearly shortened the ideation process with our friends at NASA. That has been a major problem. We were tempted at one point to basically, seed the students with different ideas, but we backed away from that because we realized that ideation still remains a major part of entrepreneurship. But clearly, we've streamlined the ideation process. We've also streamlined a bit of the financials development, um, in terms of how that works. But ultimately, we kind of like the way the program's dialed in right now. It's the result of probably 15 to 20 years worth of refinement and revision. What I've described to you today is what we now consider to be, if not perfection, close to perfection in terms of how the program runs. We find that it's challenging to students, that it really makes things work well. It touches all the things we want. Perhaps the biggest challenge for us as faculty, and what we really key in on, is that we really want the students to understand the interdependence of running a business, the organic whole, if you will. We want the students who are accountants to see how decisions that they make are going to impact the business, how marketing decisions impact the organic whole, how finance decisions and supply chain decisions impact the organic whole. That remains a major milestone for us, and we continually try and refine that and bring that further to the fore. If I had to predict over the next 5 years, as the question was posed, I would think that we're probably going to make it a point to make that even more focused for us, but I don't yet know how.
All right, got time for one or two more questions. What impact do you foresee the T2U having on the future landscape of entrepreneurship education, both at Syracuse University and other institutions?
Wow, so I'm going to put on my big global hat now to answer that question. Um, I think you folks at NASA are really onto something here. I really do. That there is a technology transfer program that is separate from the T2U program. The T2U program is designed specifically for universities. But what you're doing is planting seeds. These seeds are going to germinate. Um, and much like an agricultural analogy, if I could take it a step further, you plant enough seeds, you're going to eventually get a crop. And the folks at T2U, through the 60 plus colleges that they're working with, are planting a lot of seeds. This program is becoming more and more well known among students who themselves will be entrepreneurs in the coming years. As we know, entrepreneurship is not necessarily something you start the day you graduate. The entrepreneurial bug bites people at different stages of their life. But now those future entrepreneurs are going to be aware of this program. They're going to be aware of the different technologies that are offered by NASA. And NASA is going to continue to improve that portfolio of new discoveries. So I see what NASA is doing here as a major boon to entrepreneurship here in the US, period, full stop. I think that what they're doing is dramatic, both from an educational standpoint, but also I think from a real world practitioner standpoint. I can see businesses spinning off and getting done, and indeed NASA does spotlight those spin-offs with regularity.
Yep, that is true. Kind of a follow-up to that, it seems like got a question, more of a comment that says, have you thought about posting online the business plans for entrepreneurs and former students who are now alumni might be able to pick up where other students left off?
Mm.
So it seems like kind of an evergreen resource of ideas.
Boy, if we did, we would have literally 1,000 business
Hmm.
plans. We've kept a catalog, we've kept a library of them. They are available to students presently because one of the challenges, as we've mentioned for ideation, is that the students need to come up with something never been done in the world before. That's a bit of a challenge, obviously. There's another follow-on to that statement. Never been done in Capstone before either. And we have a catalog of all the different business plans that the students have to review to be sure they're not covering ground that has been traveled by another student team in recent years. That portfolio has, well, in any given year, we're going to have 100 student teams present business plans. You can see how that adds up pretty quickly. The question about posting it becomes a question of ownership, frankly. And that's a question beyond my capabilities. I'd have to think about that and research that issue. Is the work product the ownership of the students who created it? Is the work product the ownership of the university? Is it free and open source? Those are questions I don't know the answers to, but I agree with you. It would be quite appealing to be able to put those kinds of business plans out there to the world to be able to see and generate additional entrepreneurial interest throughout the country. I'm going to take a homework assignment. I'm going to look into that. Thank you for the idea.
Be curious to see what you come up with that one.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and close with my favorite question to ask, which is, what advice or pieces of experience would you offer to, say, an instructor who's newly taken this project on, or someone who has just heard about it for the first time today and is considering taking it back to their educational institution?
That's an easy one. That's a softball. Um, I'm going to explain to you that you should do what I did. As I mentioned at the outset of our conversation today, 2 years ago, I watched one of these videos and I said, wow, I think I can use this in Capstone. And I sent an email off to T2U that was probably about 6 pages long. And I was just telling everything there possibly was about everything about Capstone And Michaela was kind enough to respond. She said, "I don't need to know anything more. I think I know everything I need to know." But the point was that how do you follow up on this? You simply shoot an email back. You see the email on the screen in front of us. Send that email off. If it's not Michaela, it's going to be someone like Michaela who's going to reach out to you and say, "Hey, what do you got going on over there at your school?" Because the reality is that Michaela is working with 60 plus, Michaela and her team are working with
Yeah,
60
not
plus
just
different
me.
universities. Yeah, right. Um, and none of us do it the same way. So
Mhm.
my guess is Michaela is uniquely positioned to know what higher education is doing and how the different variations of this approach are happening at different universities around the country. And no doubt she can be a great resource for you in that question. How's that, Michaela? I kind of threw it back on you, but
Yeah, you
but
really
in
did.
fact, that's kind of what you do, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I would to anyone who's interested in picking this up, that email goes directly to me. If you have questions, would love to hear them. And we started this series specifically to create a platform for innovative instructors like Ken to talk about what they've been up to and with T2U. So I'd encourage you to go back and watch the other recorded episodes of this. This one will be recorded as well, and we posted in the next couple of days. Um, so yeah, take a look at that. Everyone does it slightly differently, and that is kind of by design. This is not we don't provide curriculum for this. This is not something we instruct you on how to do. This is an extremely flexible and meant to be integrated in however fits best into your class. Um, so yeah, with that, thank you, Ken, for coming on and sharing your experience. I encourage anyone in the audience who's curious to reach out and to visit the website.
My
All we
pleasure.
have
Thank
time
you.
for today. All right, see you guys next time.
Bye now.